Hello students, our today's topic will be Theme 8 Peasants, Zamindars and the State, Agrarian Society and the Mughal Empire, 18th to 17th century. Peasants lo nei mi thing tlang mi ti na Zamindars kan ti chuan ram nei tu state ram Agrarian Society. About 85% of the populations in India lived in villages. Both peasants and landlords were involved in agricultural productions. Agencies from outside entered into the rural agrarian world, the Mughal state, the agents of the state, the record keepers. And now we go to peasants and agrarian productions. The basic unit of agricultural society was the village inhabited by these peasants. And also the peasants contributed their labors to the productions of these agro-based goods like sugar and oil. And next, rural Indian includes this cultivable fertile land, uncultivable large tracts of dry lands, hilly regions, forests. Okay? And agriculture not only took place in fertile land, also a large tracts of dry land was used, as well as these hilly regions were also used for this agricultural purpose. And in addition to this, forest areas made up a good proportions of the territory. Ale, Indian mi za samriat pangalai mei hi lo nei mi thing tlang ramat cheng an nia ti chuan an thlom hala ka hianin an in khat em ani thing tlang mi lo nei tu te an khovela hianin thop tu an ron lut ani chung te chu Mughal state kan ti te agents of the state le record keepers te hian ni chuan lo nei tu te in nga na ber chu thlom halak thlom hanei hian nia an thlom hanei atang khanin thlai chi sang te an thara chuan zor tur chi chini kan ti te an siam chuak ani tel kan ti te ram tha leilung tha me ni lovin tlang ram cheng chet taka te po khan thlom ma an la a an chuan ram ngo zau tak an neya chu chuan ram bung zau tak a siam ani. Okay, next we go to this looking for sources. Let's see, from where do we know about this Mughal Empire? Farmers did not write about themselves. So our major sources of this agricultural history from the 6th and the 17th century is those of these chronicles and these documents which were written under the supervisions of this Mughal court. Aini Akbari is one of the most important chronicles, okay? And this was written by the court historians of this Akbar, Abul Fazl. These chronicles records has made the arrangement made by the states for ensuring cultivations, collections of taxes by the state, and the regulations of these relations between the state and the rural zamindars. And the major objectives of this Aini Akbari was to present the visions of this Akbar's empire, okay, where this was strong ruling class and maintained social harmony. We can say is that whatever we came to know about the peasants from this Aini Akbari was basically a view of top officials of these Mughal administrations, okay? And also a numbers of documents of this East India Company are also available, which shows slides and agricultural relations of this Eastern India. And all these sources provide us with useful information about these instant conflicts between these peasants and the state as well, okay? ole lo nei tu te khanin an mani chanchin hi an ziak lo ani ma se 16 le 17th century agricultural history in a tarlan dan chuan chronicles kan ti chronicles tiom zia chu hun kal zela thil lo thleng chin chia na mo le documents le khapoi mo atangin lo nei tu te chanchin hi kan hria ni tiro mughal lal akbar a hianin a court historians abul fazal kha felfai takin an hun kal zel anom dan te kha azia tira alo chin chia tir thlap ani mo an thlom halak dan te an rorel dan te zia ka hmu tur a om nge khan an ramin kai nge in kai shwaina kha a felfai a chiang em me ni tiro okay next we go to peasants and their lands. Indo-Persian sources denotes the peasants was a riots, plural ria, or muzariant. We also encounter the terms Kishans and Assami. Okay, this average of peasants of North India possess a pair of these bullock carts and two plow. And there are two kinds of peasants in the 17th century. These are Khud Kasta and Pahi Kasta. The first kinds of this peasant, that is Khud Kasta, of the peasants, they live in those villages where they had their own lands. And the second kinds of this peasant, that is the Pahi Kasta, where those peasants who cultivated land on a contractual basis. Okay, cultivation was based on the principles of individual ownership. Peasants bought and sold their lands like other properties, and there was abundance of land, available labor, and the nobilities of the peasants were the three factors that accounted for the constant expansions of this agriculture. Okay, ole lo nei tu te hian to lai lir te leile na ten siamin rim takin nan thok thin ani mo chuan lo nei tu hi chinhi anom boka chung te chu khut khasta le pahi khasta ania khut khasta hi thingtlang a cheng an mani ram leilet nge ya khloma nei te hian nia chuan pahi khasta ve thung hi chu mi huan mo mi leilet an en kola chuanin anei tu te nen khan anin rem siam thin ani chu chuan lo nei tu te hian an ram te shalin an le enge an du dan an du tu an lei thei bok ani chu And next we go to irrigations and technology. Like modern days, monsoon was considered as the backbone of Indian agricultural during the Mughal period. But the crops for which additional water was required, they used these artificial means of irrigations, and the state also helped for the developments of these means of irrigations. Let's take an example with a state in this North India. They dig new canals and also they repair the old canals. These Shah canals of this Punjab during the reigns of this Shah Jahan is an examples of this such repair. Okay, and those techniques which were used by these peasants for agriculture were mainly based on this animal force, like the light wooden plow and a drill was used to plant seeds which were pulled out by a pair of oxen, and also a narrow iron blade was used with a small wooden handle was used by this hoeing and weeding the field. Okay, and next we go to an abundance of crops. Agriculture was mainly organized in two major seasons. One was the Kharif autumn and the other was this Rabi spring. Except for most arid or inhospitable lands, the minimums of these two crops were grown in a year, and sometimes even 3 crops were grown, okay? And others means of these irrigations were abundant and were often came across the terms like this Jin-e Kamil in different sources, which means perfect crops. Okay, it means the Mughal state encouraged the peasants to grow crops which earned more which earn more revenue for the state. Crops like this cotton, sugarcane, oilseed, lentils were included among the cash crops. Many new crops reached this Indian subcontinent in the 17th century from different parts of the world, like these maize came to India from Africa and Spain, and vegetables like this tomato, potatoes, and these chilies were also introduced. In the same way, these fruits like pineapples and this papaya were also introduced. Okay, Mughal lalram atanga voini tlenga lo nei tu te in nga na chu fur kho fur hi ni irrigation anram leilung tuya chomin tuikong mumal tak an siama mo thala po an buai ve ngai lo ani bu le thlai an hiang nar em atlang puin kum khata nge voi thlai chi sang sang pahni pathum te an ching thin ani chu chuanin zor tur chi zor sum kan ti chi thlai oil seeds kan ti te sugar cane cotton lentils thlai zam chi kan ti te chuan fruits lampang a papaya kan ti te apple te po kha an thar cheu zel mai ani. And next we go to village community. The village community included the cultivators, the panchayats, and the village headman as Mugadam or the mandals. Cultivators were divided into different groups between these castes, and the large numbers of tillers of the land included those people who work as agricultural labor. Okay, they were forced to live a life full of poverty and misery. Castes like these Ahir, Guzars, and Maliks rose in social hierarchies, and due to this profitable increase in occupations like this cattle rearing and horticulture and this pastoral and fishing caste also acquired the status of these peasants. Okay, and we go to these peasants and the headman. Panchayat of the village was an assembly of elders. Generally those important people were its members who had some ancestral property. Okay, headman, the village panchayat was an assembly of elders headed by this headman known as the mandals or this mugadam. The headman of this panchayat remained in his office until he had the confidence of village elders, and he could be removed from his office in case he failed to retain the confidence. Okay, panchayat kanti village council te le ko khatlal kanti te khan van tlang nun kha an kai shuai thin ani mo village panchayat te hi an khomilun thla tu te tangzela shuai tu ni na lo chel to te kha khotlanga upa ho the ani tlang pui ani mi pui le an kho pa ten an rin chung kha chu office kha an lua theya ma se an rin to lo emo rin na an ngat ngam to lo ani chuan office kha an chua san thung thin ani chu an dan ani panchayat. And this panchayat had the right to levy fines and expulsions of anyone from this and from their community. Khochunga nge du lo zong ine mo kholo mo an omani chuan leite in choi tirin an khochunga changa in no chwa thleng khan he village panchayat headman hianin aken ko thin ani chu. Okay, next we go to these village artisans. One of the most interesting aspects of village was the elaborate relationships of exchange between these different producers. There were great numbers of artisans who lived in this village. Around 25% of total households in the villages belong to these artisans. Okay, sometimes it was very difficult to differentiate between these peasants and these artisans because they used to do both kinds of works. These cultivators were also engaged in these productions of many things like textile, printing, dyeing, making, and repairings of these agricultural implements, pottery, etc. And these potters, carpenters, blacksmiths, barbers, and even these goldsmiths provided their service to the village men. And one thing we should know is that in the Mughal regions, revenue was assessed and collected in the forms of these castes. And this, lastly, this goldsmith, kan ti chuan rang kachak le tangkarat tu kan tiang. So village chuan these goldsmith, they act as the bankers to make this remittance of this money, and exchange of this currency was done by this goldsmith. Okay. Village artisans kan ti chuanin thil siam thiam mi them thiam ti na ni ku them thiam na nei te kha enge nei te kha nin enge siam le bong tu thlo te bel te rang ka chak ten chera mo thing lampang siam tu te thil siam mystery kan ti te lumet tu te chia khon tu te Mughal period ta khani na nom thlap vek ani chu. And this, what is this Little Republic? Little Republic ki Mughal period a British official ho mu da na ni ya tlem kan soi zau lo kang Republic kan ti chuan mi pui than ro rel na ram anisia tiro ma se he Mughal agrarian society a hianin he chuanin Republic kan ti hi tlem atlem shet emonia chu o ti turani mo British ho mu da na chuanin. Let's see here. Some British officials in the 19th century saw the village as this little republic made up of fraternal partners sharing resources and labor in collective, but this was not a sign of egalitarian because there exist deep inequalities based on caste and gender distinction. Ditlatani anivet hei thau tiro achanchu class distinction te inequalities in tluklan lo na tele gender distinctions in clear shan nakha aom vetlat ani. Isn't that in Mughal society? Ole khati zong kha voina kan explain thei chu ni ya. Thank you all.